Hello, boys and girls of fourth grade. This is Mrs. Brewster with another science lesson. This week we're going to break up our lesson into two different lessons. So you'll have this video and another video both days, so I don't do one day, one the other day. Great job on your cell models and drawings. It was really cool to see what you guys came up with for our last lesson. That was a really good job on those. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And we're going to start today learning taxonomy. So continuing on with learning about living things and living organisms. We're going to do taxonomy today, and we're going to do the 6 kingdoms in taxonomy in the second video. Taxonomy is the study of classifying living things. What does that mean? That means categorizing and labeling different living things, plants and animals, and other things that are alive into different categories. Anything made up of living cells, like what we were discussing last week. So if it's made up of a living cell and it's alive and it has those 5 traits of all living things that we talked about last week, then they put it inside one of these 6 kingdoms and they categorize it as scientists. Before we really get into it, please make sure that you have your class notes in front of you, the worksheets that went along with this lesson. There's 1 page for today, and then there's 2 pages for tomorrow's. Please follow along and fill those in as we go through this lesson together. If you weren't able to print those off, don't worry about that. That's okay. Just use a separate scratch paper, any kind of computer paper, line paper that you have. Use that paper and take notes. And then you can just send those notes to me in a picture or to your teacher in a picture. Please don't feel like you need to write everything down. If you're writing your own notes and not using the ones that I typed up in advance, you do not have to write everything down. Just write down the most important things. Okay, classifying living things. Scientists classify living things based on their traits. A trait is a characteristic of a living thing. Example, insects have 6 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All insects, if they fall into the phylum of insect, then they have 6 legs. Arachnids, spiders, have 8 legs, so they are not technically insects. They have a different trait or characteristic. Another thing would be mammals versus reptiles and birds. Birds and reptiles lay eggs. Mammals have live births. So those are 2 different types of traits. So that puts them in different categories for scientists. Carl Linnaeus is the man who made the system that we use today. He was kind of over the system of his time. It was very difficult. His quote about it is, he wrote, "I shudder at the sight of most botanical names given by modern authorities," which means that all of the names of plants back in those days for scientists were really complicated and difficult. And he didn't like the way that they were organizing and naming things. It was very confusing, and it wasn't going to work for much longer because, you know, as they continued to discover more plants, and as they discovered the New World with North and South America, and they discovered a whole bunch more plants and animals, the system that they'd been using was going to break. It wasn't going to work anymore. So he made a new system. For example, the tomato back in his time under the old system had this huge long name, Solanum, caule, inerme, herbaceo, folus, pinnatus, incisus, racemus, simplicibus. That is a long name, just for one tomato. He renamed it using his own system in 1753, and the tomato got the new name of Solanum lycopersicum. And that is much easier, even though it is still in Latin, which is something we don't speak anymore. It's a lot easier than the old way of doing it. And everything now has two names. The tomato did change its name until once more, as they tried to narrow down into more specifics about the tomato. And so its new name was Lycopersicum esculentum. And people studied Latin a lot more back then, so that kind of helped. But some people do study Latin, especially if you're going to be learning more of the scientific names. Having some background in Latin as a dead language does help with that. Linnaeus's own motto for what he did was God created, Linnaeus organized. So Linnaeus organized all of God's created living things, organisms, into categories. And we use the same system that he made today. This is his system. It is a system of 7 categories that become increasingly narrower in what fits into those categories. There are 6 kingdoms in total right now, and we will discuss those in the next video. And as we go further and further down the system, more and more things get taken out as you specifically get to a certain animal or plant or microorganism for that matter. So for example, the kingdom of animal gets broken down into different phylums, and insect with an exoskeleton goes into a different phylum than a bird or a cat, which have a backbone, which would go to a different phylum. So as these things get lower and lower, things get broken up more and more into different categories, more specific categories. And that helps scientists a lot. So we're going to go through this to kind of show you an example of what this looks like. We're going to go through it with a cat. What does it look like for a cat, for example? The kingdom for cat is Animalia, or animal. They're in the animal kingdom. In other words, they have animal cells, which we talked about yesterday, well, not last, couple weeks ago. Animal cells, they have just a cell membrane. They're able to move around the cells. They have nucleuses in their cells. They do not have chloroplasts. They do not have a cell wall. They have mitochondria, all of those things that make up an animal cell. In order to be in the animal kingdom, you have to have animal cells. And we'll go into more of that, but also animals, this animal kingdom specifically is also for multicellular creatures. So specifically creatures that are made up of more than one cell. And we'll go into that more, but basically all animals are made up of more than one cell, otherwise they wouldn't be able to be seen. Phylum. A cat goes under Chordata phylum, which is for backboned animals. So any animal with a backbone, lizard, snake, cheetah, cat, all fall into the phylum, which excludes insects. They have exoskeletons, so they do not go into this phylum. They go into a different one. Class, Mammalia, or mammal. Those are animals that give live births and produce milk for their young. Those fall under mammal. So a cow, a goat, a cat, a dog, those are all mammals. This would now exclude birds, reptiles, which have eggs. Order, carnivora, carnivores. Cats eat meat. They're carnivores. So anything that eats meat would fall under this order. Dogs, bears, lions, cats, all are carnivores. This would now exclude goats, cows, and deer. Those are all herbivores. They do not fall into this category. They would go into a separate herbivore order. Family, Felidae. Felidae, feline. So all felines fall under this family. Cats fall under this. So do lions, tigers, not bears, cheetahs, anything that has retractable claws. I don't know if you ever noticed that a cat can retract its claws. The cheetah is the one exception to that. They have lithe bodies, which are thin, graceful bodies, and round heads. So any animal fitting that description would fall under feline. That it would start to exclude dogs, bears, and then other carnivores wouldn't fall into this family. Genus, the genus Felis. For cat, basically the main difference between feline and felis is for small cats. Bobcats, lynxes, house cats fall under felis. Bigger cats, such as tigers, lions, fall under a different genus. And then specifically the species Catus for house cat. So that would now exclude the lynx and the bobcat and whatnot. And it becomes a much more specific description. And so the method of Linnaeus is to take the genus and the species only for the name. And so that would make the name for cat Felis catus. That would be it, which is very, very simple, much simpler than the other names that they used to be. So for cat, Felis catus, and that was just a whole lot of an easier system. Go ahead and finish your notes. If you missed something from this video, go back and find it. If you needed to pause at some point, you can go back and pause and write something down. Otherwise, go ahead and you'll be done, and we'll meet back for the day 2 video. Thank you for listening along with your notes, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.